reason, he always preferred sleeping in a hammock rather than sleeping in a bed. He wasn't always the easiest person to get along with, but he had his own ways of selflessly helping those around him. Some of those stories will be shared here today. Our ceremony will be short and sweet, as Robert liked to get to the point. Although Robert did not believe in religion, he believed in family. And I am grateful so many of you are here to remember Robert with us today. Thank you for being here and sharing your memories, because every person here represents part of Robert's life. We'll hear from some family members shortly. There will also be an open time at the end for anyone to share a story or fond memories of Robert if they wish. Let us begin with a moment of silence to reflect upon this day and remember who Robert was to each of us. And now, our dad, Robert, or Bob, or Bod, as sometimes Robert liked to say.
Don't forget food. Don't forget food.
Alex announced me. I'm Bob.
I'm Mike.
I'm Bob. Can you hear me now?
Yes.
I'm Robert's stepdad. I read something once and it resonated with me, so I'd like to share it with you. It says here, a life is not important except in the impact it has on other lives. That just resonated with me. So I'm going to start with my clothes. I have complained for years about getting earaches in the wind. I used to wear all these crazy hats. Some of you remember the hats I used to wear because I didn't like earaches in the wind. Robert said, hey, I think I got a solution for you, Bob. It's called a buff. And so now most of you see me. There you go, tall guy. Most of you see me wearing the buff, and this is a tribute to Robert. Because of him, I wear that. I'd also complain because I'm a griper. Maybe it's because I'm Jewish. But I worked out all the time, and I'd complain about sweating, sticking to my back after the workout. And before they were popular, Robert said, hey, there's something called a wicking shirt. Let me get you one. What's a wicking shirt? He says, never mind. It just wicks the sweat off of you. You'll feel great. So he got me trained and converted me to wicking shirts. That's been my go-to shirt ever since. I love to walk in the ocean. I love walking up and down streams. And I hated the little water shoes and water socks that you could get at Big Five. So I'd go back to my trusty tennis shoes with socks when I was a little kid, and I would go play in the beach and everything, and then, like everybody else, my shoes would be sopping wet, full of sand, and I'd have to clean them out, and it'd feel miserable and clammy when I was done. And Robert insisted, he said, Bob, I got a solution for you. Let's go to REI. They got every shoe in the world. And I said, I don't really need to. He says, I'm not going to quit with you, Bob. We're going to do this thing. So he took me to REI, dragged me there. We spent an hour and a half looking at shoes. And from then on, he found a pair that's called water sandals. And I wear them everywhere, not only in the water. So the sandals I wear are his. And finally, we kind of can share clothes. And if you know Robert, he loves shorts. He's a short guy, even when it's cold, because he loves cold weather, and he loves gazillion pockets. And so he said, hey, Bob, do you want these shorts? Yeah, he gave me a couple, and he said, I just don't like them anymore. They don't fit right. Probably they didn't have enough pockets. So he said, sure, I'll take them. Well, the shorts I wear, my favorite shorts, Robert wore these for 2 years before I did. So everything I have is a tribute to Robert. He has changed how I dress. Next thing I want to talk about is I used to say, and I still say to this day, I want our house to be a haven. A place where you feel comfortable, that you feel warm and welcome. And Robert was living with us a few years back, and he comes and he says, I found this great game called Cranium. Call up Alex. Let's start playing a game. I'll teach you and Mom to play, and we're going to play Cranium. And so they had the original teams, Robert and Alex versus Mom and Dad. And those two kids just crushed us and dominated us for a year and a half. Better still? Anyway, so a part of humor was there was one particular challenge in this game that I was totally inept at. And what you would do is you'd read a card. The opponents could see the card first, so they could see what you're trying to do. You'd look at the card, and then you'd have to get your partner to guess within a time period what it said on the card by using modeling clay. And on this one particular game, the word was lobster. So I'm trying to conceptualize what a lobster is. And I'm trying to do it in modeling clay, and Sharon is shouting, "Oh, come on, honey, you can do it. This time you're finally going to get it. You're going to get it this time, honey. We're going to get it." And then she's yelling out, "It's an alarm clock. It's Australia. It's bacon and eggs." It's, and the kids are laughing their heads off, and finally it ends, and he said, "Bob, what is that you were doing?" He said, "It's a lobster." He said, "Well, where are the claws? They're on the side." "No, Bob, the claws are in the front, Bob. Where's the tail?" "Oh, I forgot the tail." So he actually made a lobster in about 15 seconds with the clay that looked like a lobster. So when I think about Robert having impact on our lives, he brought a haven and love into our house by that game, which I remember, which leads right in to the next thing. I got the house before I met Sharon, and it was a fixer-upper, and the guest bathroom in particular looks terrible. But all of a sudden, there's 6 of us living in a 3-bedroom, 2-half house, and I didn't want to take the bathroom out of commission to remodel it to make people uncomfortable. So, and then after the kids came home, they started coming back. And then we have guests come and stay. And I said, it's more important to me for our guests to feel like our house is a haven than to remodel this dumb bathroom. So Robert had this brainstorm. What if we added a half bath? We could have an ad bath, and then you could eventually decide if you want to remodel a main bath. So Robert took the bull by the horns, and he has some contracting experience. So he started to make plans, submit them to the county, get them approved, and he'd reach out to friends of ours who were in the contracting business for guidance. And he did everything, like new plumbing, HVAC, electrical, drywall, you name it, he was doing it. But there'd be a frustration part to it to him. He'd say, "Bob, I want your ideas on this. Like, what do you think we should be doing? What do you want, Bob?" He started explaining it to me. And I just looked at it, I couldn't conceptualize it. And finally one day, by the way, Robert has a lot of great qualities. Patience was not one of them. So I finally said to Robert, "Hey, the lobster. Remember the lobster?" He goes, "The lobster? Oh, the lobster. Hey, Bob, let's go to Home Depot, or let's go to the kitchen bathroom store, and I'll show you." So that became our code word. So when Robert would start talking, I said, "Robert, lobster time. We just get in the car, avoid the stress, and go get these things." And then it flipped the other way, where he'd remember, "Hey, Bob, it's lobster time." So lobster time was to go get this thing done. So eventually, and there's one kind of a side story I want to say, is that he was the one, and I also told him, anytime you want to sub something out, go ahead. And there was one thing he was afraid to tackle, and that was the bathroom countertop. And that turned out, so I said, "Okay, we'll get bids for it." And it's really labor intensive, which I didn't understand. I said, "Wow, it's mostly labor, it's not materials." I said, "Why don't you give it a shot, Robert?" "Oh, I can't do that." I said, "With the cost of the labor, you could do it 8 times and mess it up, and if you get it right on the 8th time, we're still ahead." "Oh, Bob, I'll be so pissed off at myself if I screw it up once." "Try it." He nailed it the first time. So in terms of making our house a haven, he did it physically. So I really touched every time I go in the house, every time I go to the bathroom, I think of Robert. And all. Hey, he knew his shit if somebody didn't know what I'm talking about. Robert knew his shit. So the last thing I want to talk about with Robert is he had all these crazy events that he got into and activities like I did not understand. And one of the things he got into, and we have pictures of it, it's called a Tough Mudder. I'd never heard of a Tough Mudder, but Sharon and I would go and support him in these crazy, and for those people who don't know what it is, it's like a 12-mile or so, very difficult, steep, up and downhill run with an obstacle course in the middle of it. And on top of that, if that's not enough, they have electrical shocks hitting you throughout this whole race. So, okay. So we supported Robert two or three times with that, and then he started reaching out to his cousins, Dakota and Dustin, and then Alex. And so they're all doing these things, and all of a sudden he says, "Bob, I want you to do a Tough Mudder with me." "What?" "Bob, I want you to do a Tough Mudder with me." I had broken a collarbone 4 months earlier. I wasn't fully recovered. And I'm more than twice the age of the competitors. What are you doing? He said, Bob, I promise you, I'll take care of you. And I said, he wants to do this. He wants to share his love of this thing with me. I'll do it with him. I'll do it for him. So Alex, Robert, and I went to Patterson, California to do this race. We show up, and they announced that there were 15 people that went to the hospital the prior day with broken bones. And he said, Bob, I gotcha. Don't worry about it. We're okay. So we start the race, and Alex takes off like a scalded hound. And Robert looks at me and says, I guess he's going for a top finish. I will stay here with you, Bob. And so Robert would go over an obstacle, and then he would coach me how to get over an obstacle, which was hard for me with one arm, and sometimes I'd go around the obstacle. But as we kept going, I was like, I'm there for Robert, I'm there for Robert. And his enthusiasm started getting, it was infectious. It was actually addicting, and the more into it he got, the more into it I was getting. I was getting more and more pumped and jazzed because the energy was working. And in the middle of the race, the only thing I could do with a broken collarbone was run. And people who live near us know I power up this hill right across our street. So I could really power up and down hills. That's all I could do. And we finally get to a part where we're powering up the hill. And I said, all right, there's something I can do. And I'm powering up that hill, and all of a sudden I hear a voice way behind, Bob, Bob. And Robert's like 50, 75 yards behind me. He says, would you slow down? I'm gassed. I went, this is really cool. Now we're helping each other. He's just not helping me. I can slow down for him. So we're doing this race, and then we get to a critical point where we're in a culvert that is filled up to here with mud. And it's got a bend in it. It's a long culvert that we have to crawl through. And since it's got a bend, you can't see out the other end. It's dark. So he powers through, and I'm behind him going slowly because I'm trying to protect the right side. And people are so cool. They know I'm holding up the conga gun. I'm the guy holding up the traffic. I said, it's okay, sir. Take your time. And so I get near the end, and Rob's out there and says, Bob, give me a hand. I'll help you out. And I go, no, I got it. I've gone all this way. I'll go the last 5 yards. He says, Bob, let me help you out. I said, Robert, I got this. I've been this. Please, Bob, let me help you. So I stuck my arm out, because it was about Robert. And I grabbed his forearm, and he grabbed my arm, and he pulled me through. And there was such a connection to me. It was an emotional moment of him showing that he would take care of me, and we could rely upon each other. And it resonated, and I get out of there, and I go, God, that was really a big moment for me. I said, we got 5 more miles to go. So we finished this race, and the end of the race, you're going through something that looks like a car wash, but instead of those felt things going back and forth cleaning the car, these are electric wires that are shocking you all the way down to your toes as you're climbing through obstacles. So you got 50, 70 yards to go. And I said, yeah, I could do this thing, and I go like this, like I'm praying, trying to filter myself like a fish through this thing. I finish it, and Sharon's at the other end, and she catches our picture. And you see Robert's smile. My smile was just as big as his. I was so on a high. I stayed on that high for 2 weeks. And I've never fully come down. So, going all the way back to the beginning, where I said, a life is not important except in the impact it has on other lives. Well, if that's a true statement, then Robert has been very, very important to me. And I will always love him. I will always cherish him. I will always miss him. And may he rest in peace.
Like you said, I'm Dustin. I'm one of Robert's many cousins. Thank you all for coming. We all really appreciate it. Can you guys hear me?
You need to be on the same level.
Better?
There you go.
Is this better?
There you go. There you go.
Well, there's 2 things I know about Robert. There's actually a lot more things I know about Robert. But in terms of what he would want me to say in front of all of you, I only know 2 things about Robert. He was passionate as hell, and he loved pooping. Robert took around a 6-month trip visiting U.S. national parks, And during that trip, he sent me 14 postcards with little updates or little things he wanted to say. Half of them were about poops and boobs. Whether it was the time he told me about the bear he saw taking a huge dump, or the time he told me he pooped in the Atlantic Ocean when he was visiting Acadia National Park in Maine, and many in between. I would get middle of the night texts from Robert describing the shape, color, and dimensions of Robert's most significant poos. Moving on. And here comes the serious shit. I've never known someone as passionate about so many things as Robert. He could talk for hours about cars and trucks, guns, anything outdoors, science and physics. And he talked a lot about his plans for the future. He said he wanted to buy one of those big old storage shipping containers and convert it into a house to live in. He said he wanted to buy a Subaru WRX V8 SS9 and makeshift it so he could go roll around and flip in the sand dunes. I just made up those letters. It's not probably a real car. But that was kind of like conversations with Robert were like that. He's shaking his head right now. But man, he could talk. And he spoke with such passion and enthusiasm all the time. And I'd be happy to listen to his same stories and plans over and over and over again. And this is something he got mad at Bob a lot for, was repeating stories. But Robert did the exact same thing, and maybe even worse. But I was happy to listen over and over again because it put me where I am today. On our trips when I was younger, and Robert was working at Marin General in the emergency room, I would always ask him questions about things he saw. What was the coolest thing you saw? What was the grossest thing you saw? What was the funniest thing you ever saw? And he has this really good enema story. Yeah, and he really laid it all out there. But anyway, with all these stories, I remember one of our trips to Sequoia National Park, I started asking different kinds of questions. Have you ever seen a tracheotomy? How does blood flow through the heart? And later, when he finished his bio degree, and I was starting college, we made up a question game. We would try and stump each other all the times with different questions and different facts that we had learned. But Robert's favorite question, like I told you, he liked to repeat himself, so didn't know that he had already asked me this question, but he said it several times. His favorite question to ask me, what is the single largest living organism on Earth? Anyone have any guesses? Yeah, Magley? It's a mushroom. It's a fungus. It's actually nicknamed the humongous fungus. It's from the Pacific Northwest. It weighs about 22,000 pounds, and it kind of intertwines itself up in living organism, living plant material, and connects itself and extends its roots way deep under the forest floor. We made up a lot of games together, and we even came up with our own team name. We called ourselves the Nuclear Knuckleheads. Anytime we were doing something crazy, we'd jump off a rock and say, "Nuclear Knuckleheads!" And it was our thing. But anyway, it was this stupid science question game we played that pushed me to want to learn medicine and further my education. Admittedly, the frequency and the difficulty of questions decreased as the duration of the time of years since we both finished school increased, but we still tried. A year and a half ago, as I was applying to schools, Robert, who had no interest in going back to healthcare, gifted me his stethoscope, and it's the only one I'll ever use. On the bellow of the stethoscope, he wrote, "Robert Lake." We all knew Robert, how he loved helping others, he loved hiking and driving, he loved building things, and by God did he love burritos. His all-time favorite fact to tell others about himself was that he was 2013's top taquero reviewer on Yelp. I'm sure it was true. But this was the direct result for his quest for the perfect carnitas burrito. And I think I'll rest knowing he found it. But Robert loved helping others, He helped me move into my house. He tried time and time again to teach me how to drive a stick. And he helps me and others in 1,000 ways. Helping others was his favorite thing to do. And along that, Robert was someone who did whatever he wanted to do. Whatever fun thing he thought of doing that day, that's what he did. On random hikes, he would just point to the top of a mountain and say, "Let's go to there." He would see a large boulder, point at it and say, "Let's climb on that." We'd stumble across a river, and he would say, "Let's make it flow left instead of right," and proceed to go ahead and build a dam. On his national park trip, he learned how to build a quinzhee, which is just a snow igloo. And he wrote on his blog post, he said, "I have a goal of making a quinzhee so large that I can hang my hammock inside." On one of the postcards he sent, he wrote that he wanted to challenge me to see who can build a bigger quinzhee. I know a lot of us think that he was bitter and mean, and scary, and mad at life. But look at these photos around us. Listen to our stories. He loved his life. He loved living in his own world. He lived a lot more than most of us ever will. Have any of you come face to face with a bobcat at the bottom of a 1,600-foot-long cave, 100 feet underground? Don't think so. Well, yeah, so did Robert. I think he was dealt a bad hand and he struggled through it. And I have a lot of regret forever for not better helping him. But I don't think for a second that he was mad at life. He was just trying to find a way to enjoy life and battle his diseases at the same time. And it was obviously harder than any of us can imagine. I once told Robert, people do come out of this, and if anyone can, it's you. Yes, he was still really scary, though. I admit it. I would never tell him that to his face, though. I'll finish off with a quick dumb anecdote. Our second to last little excursion together. After an unsuccessful trek to the top of Mount Whitney, Robert wanted to take me to the top of one of his old favorite rock climbing spots, Mount Conness, just on the east rim of Yosemite. Robert only lasted about a half mile before he decided he didn't want to follow the trail any longer. And he decided to then jump over the river and go for a straighter, more head-on approach. And I knew from that second that we would not get to the top of this mountain. Robert had this conviction that as long as you were going up, you were going the right way. I tried telling him several times that that's not how it works. For the last, I let him lead the way. He was excited. And we eventually came to what appeared to be the last ascent of God only knows what mountain we were on at that point. I firmly believe we were about 3 miles south of Mount Conness. But anyway, we were at the last bit of ascent of a mountain, and it was a 500-foot straight-up vertical boulder field, and I was really scared. But Robert headed off like there was a REI 50% off sale at the top. And I was struggling over every single rock, and it got to the point where I started to kind of fear for my own life, whether it was one slip or one loose rock, and I kind of had a panic attack. I'd never had a panic attack before, didn't know what it would feel like, but I had one, and I kind of envisioned our lives way in the future. I knew that if I kept climbing that I wouldn't be able to see it. So I yelled up to Robert. I said, yeah, I can't go anymore. And he said, all right. He's already at the top. He yelled back, all right, I'm on my way down. And that was it. He didn't judge me. He didn't pressure me. And I think he saved my life that day. And I owe him so much more than I think I ever gave him. Robert taught me more about life than anyone. Even when he was wrong, he was still trying to teach me. Even when I tried claiming I knew what I was talking about, he said more, and he said he wanted to teach me more. And he meant so much to me, and I hope he knew that. There's absolutely no one like him that I will be able to recreate our experiences with. There is no one like him that I could share our past with. But I can hope one day that I'll pass along his shared memories, the skills he taught me, and the legacy that was Robert Latham. I would like to think of Robert as this family's humongous fungus. Not for the quality of Robert's odor, but for the meaningful impact he has had on this family throughout the years, spreading and intertwining us with his kind heart and love. I will miss so much about you. I will miss your smile, your giant hugs, the soft touch on my back when you sit next to me. I'll miss your enthusiasm. And I'll even miss your opinion on the correct way to wash a fork. On Robert's blog, after a close encounter with a black bear, he wrote, "Keep your head up and your mouth shut. There is an entire world out there that you might just miss if you don't open your eyes and look around from time to time." I will never stop looking for you, Robert. I love you always. I think about you every day. Nuclear knuckleheads for life.
Get your water.
You want to take it, buddy?
Thank you everyone for coming today. My name is Carolyn and I am Robert's sister. Robert Leroy Latham, a son, a brother, a grandson, cousin, nephew, friend, a nature enthusiast, a wealth of knowledge, a caregiver, a fighter, a harsh exterior but a soft and caring soul. I really wanted to share this random fact about Robert with everyone, but I couldn't find a good place to say it within the flow of my words, so I'm just going to tell you right now really quick. Robert was freakishly good at pinching with his toes. I have no idea how he obtained this skill. Apparently Gigi taught him. In the front row. But the strength with which he could pinch was outrageous. I can't tell you how many times I got pinched under the dinner table over the years. He thought it was hilarious, and I thought it was really annoying. Figuring out what to say today has been very difficult for me. My brother and I had a rocky relationship. We fought a lot. Over the years, I've asked my mom, in somewhat joking manner, but also seriously, how in the world did Robert and I make it through high school together? She would typically laugh and roll her eyes and shrug her shoulders and just say, "My guess is as good as yours." My brother had a rough exterior shell that he didn't crack often, or for many people. He was always the tough guy. He was a wrestler in high school and would roam the halls of TL with his buddies, all with their distinct "I'm a wrestler" look. Wrestling hoodies, chin out, chest puffed, and looking like they could pin you to the ground with just their pinky finger. This, being his sister and just 1 year younger, was really annoying. I would just roll my eyes at him as he passed, which in turn would annoy him and inevitably end in me being pinned to the ground via some ridiculous wrestling move once we both got home later that day. My brother was very opinionated. He had his way of doing something, and typically that was the only way to do it, according to him, which also drove me crazy. He was opinionated and stubborn and could argue about things like how to load the dishwasher correctly until his face turned blue. This character trait that frequently brought him and I to arguments was also very warranted at times. He was a wealth of knowledge on certain topics, and I valued his strong opinions. Cars, biology, medicine, camping, backpacking, rock climbing, construction, to name a few, were topics that he could talk for hours on. You could ask him a simple question of, which backpack should I get for 3-day hiking trips? Backpack A or backpack B? And 30 minutes later, you now have 6 different backpacks in contention, and each of those backpacks has a pro and con list that he has personally written down for you. Robert loved the outdoors and loved all the toys and gears that came with doing outdoorsy things just as much. I swear he could tell you information about virtually anything in REI. He was also a wealth of knowledge about cars. Not too long ago, my brother accompanied me on a road trip from here to Boulder, Colorado. I was starting to think about buying a car for myself, so I asked Robert what kind of car he thought I should get. For the entire 19-hour car ride, if we passed a car that he thought was a good fit for me, he would interrupt the conversation or stop the podcast in order to rattle off the specs of the car and list of reasons why he thought it would be good for me. I remember being amazed at his knowledge without even having to open his phone. He was also weirdly passionate and knowledgeable about knives. And from a very young age at that. Now, I don't personally remember this story because I was too young, but my mom has told it so many times that I've conjured up images of it happening in my head. Apparently, when I was 2 days old and had just gotten home from the hospital, my mom laid me on the couch to go do something. And in my mom's defense, my grandmother Latham was supposed to be watching me, and I'm unsure where things went wrong there. But when my mom returned, Robert was sitting on top of me with a knife in his hand, repeatedly stabbing the couch around my head. My mom scooped him up from behind so as not to startle him, and when asked what he was doing, he replied that he was teaching his sister about knives. His knowledge and opinions about knives only continued to grow, and this was another topic that he could speak to for hours. Your eyes could be glazed over, and your mind could be far off in a meadow with chirping birds and beautiful wildflowers, and Robert would be going on and on about how knife A was good for cleaning fish, but knife B was really much better for cutting cooked meat. And then you could snap back into the conversation and remind him that all you did was ask him to pass you a butter knife so that you could make a peanut butter and jelly sandwich. I was lucky to have my brother come visit me a couple times while I lived in New York City, despite his strong disdain for the place. The first time he came to visit was while he was on his epic road trip across the country in 2013-2014. He wrote a blog while he was on his trip. I recently reread the blog and was amazed at his beautiful writing skills. I'm going to read the couple of paragraphs he wrote about his time he spent in New York City with my ex-husband and I. From Robert's blog. New York City. I have to admit, my jaw dropped a little when I first spotted its towering projection from the horizon. As I drove in, I noticed the rapid decrease in all things green. Needless to say, I was a little out of my element. But I had family, and as it ended up, a few friends waiting for my arrival somewhere in the forest of urban giants. Indeed, the city had the buzz of the busiest of beehives. I felt very small in such a place, almost invisible, but for the welcome awaiting me. My sister Carolyn and brother-in-law Nathan have a corner apartment not far from Union Square, so after finding parking, yes, it is possible, but requires a good bit of patience and persistence, I found myself in the best of company. As it happened, Carolyn and Nathan's friends from school had their flight canceled and so returned to continue their visit for a few more stays. After a couple of days, the temperature rose and the snow completed the transition from beautifully accenting the sharp angles of the city with its soft coat to the muck and filth of street slush. Fortunately, this allowed the stranded travelers to catch a flight home, and I too soon departed, as Acadia was calling. And then once he returned back to New York City from Acadia. Once back under my sister's roof, I felt obliged to not get in the way and contribute what I could. Remember those high ceilings and tall windows? Well, 2 of those windows have AC units at their bases and allowed for quite the draft. So I went to work insulating them. Carolyn and Nathan were happy with the result, so while they were away at work during the day, I filled my time sealing out the cold and catching up on some of the TV shows I haven't been able to access with any ease. I also managed to go out and explore a little of the local flavor. I was, of course, continuing my hunt for a proper burrito. And after Nathan and Carolyn pointed me in the right direction, I found it. Dos Toros Taqueria has done what all others have failed to do. They have nearly the same recipe as Gordo's Taqueria in the Bay Area. I ate there a lot. So good. By the time I had finished the installation project, I had spent enough time thinking about what I needed to focus on next, that it only took a short but annoying conversation with my sister to work out a game plan. So I decided to hit the road after revising my resume and sending it out to 1 or 2 places back on the West Coast. Rereading these, I am reminded that despite Robert having a rough exterior, he had a very giving and caring soul. If you needed his help, he would be there. The other time he came to visit me was in 2018 for a short 4-day trip to help me move apartments. In general, moving is awful, but moving in New York City is a whole different level of terrible, and I needed help. I promised Robert that we would eat burritos from the same restaurant that he discovered back in 2013, and he was on his way. This time around, he was much more vocal about his severe disdain for New York City. But he was there to help me, and his desire to help his sister outweighed his disgust for the big city. He definitely got his fill of New York City on this trip. I asked him to build me a couple of shelves for my new apartment because, well, it was a tiny studio apartment and I desperately needed more storage space. To Robert's complete surprise and utter disgust, I did not own a circular saw. Or more than a couple of screwdrivers and a hammer. For some reason, Robert thought I should own large power tools and full tool sets as a New York City resident. I promptly reminded him that it was not practical to own power tools in New York City, which he thought was ridiculous, and fueled his fire of why New York City is a terrible place to live, and nobody with a brain should live here. I again promptly reminded him that his sister did in fact live in New York City, and that I also had a brain. So he ended up renting a circular saw from Home Depot, and when I got back from work that afternoon, he was out on my fire escape cutting wood, which is crazy. I had a good chuckle at this and asked him how in the world he got the saw and the sheet of plywood all the way from Home Depot on 59th Street into the subway and back to my apartment on 33rd Street. In classic Robert fashion, he answered with, "Very carefully." and then told me again how much he hated this city. All of this to say, despite his disdain for the city of New York, he was still willing to drag himself around it and do unheard of projects because I needed his help. When he was helping other people, that's when he was happiest. Whether that help was in the form of projects like building a new fence or installing a half bath at my parents' house, flying to his least favorite place in the world to help his sister move, helping his aunt and uncle install a new bathroom in Carson City, projects with Grandpa, or being an integral member of the crew team to get countless family members across the Tevis Trail over the years. He was always willing to lend a manual labor hand and seemed most at home when he was doing just that. The last few years of Robert's life were a struggle, and he was often not in the greatest of moods and didn't really enjoy being around a lot of people. Despite this, he still wanted to be near family, and I believe he found solace in having all of us somewhat nearby. He would come up here to Grandma and Grandpa's house for family gatherings, but would typically be off by himself tinkering with something or hanging in his hammock. Despite his sour mood and standoffish demeanor, I remember occasionally one of the younger kids, typically Madison or Mackenzie, would have a fascination with this burly guy sitting by himself and would badger him with questions or try to engage with him. I loved seeing him talk to children. He was a teacher at heart, and it was heartwarming to see him interacting with kids. I always thought he should move to Colorado and start a company that taught kids how to survive in the wilderness. I am heartbroken that I will never get to see what he would have been like as an uncle. I know he would have been an amazing uncle. I can only imagine that I would have been absolutely terrified to leave my kids alone with him, but at the same time know that they were in the kindest and most loving hands, and that they would surely learn a lot in whatever amount of time they spent with him. I'm so heartbroken for my brother. I wish I could have taken some of his struggles off his shoulders for him. Life got pretty tough for him, and I didn't know how to help. I wish I had been around more and done more with him, but it is too late now. If you all don't mind, I would like to use this moment to give some advice. Hug and love your family and loved ones, and never stop trying to make amends if relations have been severed or are difficult. You never know when you will no longer have the opportunity to say, "I'm sorry," or "I forgive you," or "I love you." And the guilt of not saying those things when you could have is very heavy. So, Robert, I'm sorry for all the fights I caused. I forgive you for all the fights you caused, and I love you with all my heart. I am comforted by the fact that you are no longer suffering. I know you are now with Gigi and Papa and Aunt Valerie. Imagine you are sitting around a campfire, catching them up on what's been going on amongst the family over the years, and telling them about all of your backpacking and camping adventures you went on. Robert, you are not your illness, not your trauma, wounds, or hurt. You are defined by the pain. You are not defined by the pain. In our minds, you are illness second, and son, brother, cousin, nephew, grandson, friend first. Rest in peace, my brother. I will fall asleep every night with the image of your bright and joyous smile on my mind, and I will wake up and live every day to make you proud. May your helpful soul and kind spirit live on in the knowledge you shared with every single one of us.
He's an ER tech, and he decided he'd be smarter than the nurses and want to get more out of life. And he decided to go to UC Merced, and he got a degree, a double degree in immunology and biochemistry. And he did all of this while commuting and still working 3/4 time at Marin General Hospital, Marin County. So he'd commute back and forth from UC Merced to home. And he would complain about his instructors. He says, I know more about this subject than this instructor of mine. I know more than she does. This is really frustrating for me. But he got on a research team with Dr. Andy Lewang doing DNA research that was funded for medical research. It was all PhD candidates with 2 undergrads. And so Robert was one of the 2 undergrads. And although he complained about the school, he loved working with Dr. Lewang. And he said, I was worried about his grades. He says, oh God, I got this thing nailed. There's no problem. I can handle this. This is easy. I'd rather spend my time with Dr. Lewang. And so I found Dr. Lewang. He was up in Donner Summit, which Robert would love to be with him. And Dr. Lewang thought of him so highly that he offered him a scholarship for an advanced degree, master's, and then a PhD at UC Merced. And Robert passed on that. But in any event, I want to, and by the way, the reason he passed on is he hated Merced. He used to call it the armpit of California. And I say, Robert, you're an hour from Yosemite. He says, I hate hot weather. I can't stay here another minute. So he didn't take that opportunity. But I did get hold of Dr. Lewang, and he was kind enough to send us a video. So this is Dr. Andy Lewang. We're going to have, this is actually going to be, I have a nephew. My eldest nephew is Shimon, and he's got a wife, Maribel, and they live in near Seattle, up in Washington, where it's nice and cold. So Robert wanted to get into University of Washington, and I asked them if they would allow him to live with them, and they were very hesitant at first because they had a very bad experience with the younger brother of Shimon, that he lived there for 1.5 years and never pitched in, never helped out, and he lived off of them. But I told them, Robert will be different. He will contribute. He will make sure that he makes a contribution to this house. So this is Shimon and Maribel Samuel.
We are now going to enter into a time where anyone is welcome to come up and share a memory or a story about Robert. I ask that you introduce yourself and your relation to Robert so we may know who you are and the context. I also ask that you keep it brief so we can get as many people up here to share as we can. Feel free to stay seated until the person is done talking and walk up to the microphone when you feel you are ready. I'll start. My name is Brittany. I am one of Robert's 15 cousins on this side, 16 total. Grandma schooled me earlier. I don't think I've ever seen Robert ride a horse, but I also can't think of a horse ride that Robert was not at. And, which is crazy considering this family and how many of those we did. Robert was always crewing. He didn't like or seek out attention, but he always gave 110% in the background, making sure everything got done that needed to. He always showed up. We didn't always get along, but I am going to miss him.
Robert and I worked together for a little bit at Skate Sports back in Marin back in the day. And then later on, we came to know each other again through rock climbing, and he actually lived with me in Berkeley for a couple years before his road trip. I got a lot of stories about Robert, but again, I don't know how many of them are appropriate for this. I'll give the one that kind of casts him in the best light. So this one time we were moving a friend of mine to this house that we all lived in Berkeley. There were about 5 of us living in the house, and we had a U-Haul, but there were only a couple seats in the front, and there were more of us that could, they were going along, we could fit in the U-Haul, so a couple folks rode in back. And I was driving, and I like to have a little bit of fun with it, so I was kind of swerving a little and going over speed bumps a little faster than I should and stuff, and it sounded like everybody was having a good time in the back. So we got there and opened the door, or we're opening the door to let the people in the back, and unbeknownst to myself, one of the folks in the back was hanging on the rails, and so the door came in and hit her like in the head, and it started bleeding right away. And Robert was there with us, helping us move, of course, is his thing. And I mean, you've seen these pictures too, so you can imagine how, like, sort of shocking this whole scene was. But he literally ripped the shirt off of his body, a white t-shirt, and it was like this hulking dude underneath. But he like tenderly scooped up my friend and applied pressure and did all the bandaging and everything. That it wasn't like a life-threatening cut, but he was on it, and he and that was just like his thing, as he, it wasn't very convincing for everybody, but he always seemed to know what to do in the moment, and it was hard to take that seriously, but yeah, the kid was great, man. He's always down. You can't say that about a lot of people. He would just throw himself into anything, and people would laugh and kind of prod at him because he was ridiculous, but it didn't stop him, and he got people to come along anyway.
I'm Danny. I'm Bernie's husband. Married into this family 12 years ago, and we've heard a lot from people today who knew Robert really well. And I'm somebody who didn't. Wanted to. 12 years ago when I met him was at Gigi's funeral, and we all remember Gigi's funeral. Robert got up to talk about his great-grandma, and talked about how bigger boobs were, and how he liked to just bury his head in her boobs. And I think there were some members of the family who were like a little upset by that, but I didn't know him, and I literally thought, he's a freaking legend. I want to hang out with that dude, right? And I tried to connect with him over the years, and we were just the most opposite people. I'm not outdoorsy, I'm not into cars. I lived in New York for a very long time. I don't think he liked me a lot, and we just never had a connection point. But one day, we're sitting on the back, and we start talking about video games. And it's a small moment in his life. I doubt he even thinks about it, but to me it was incredible because it's the one thing we connected on. And we had the most genuine conversation, and it went on for 30 minutes, and I didn't want it to end. But I ran out of stuff to talk about with video games. But the reason I wanted to share that story is because it just shows the person that he was. That it doesn't matter who you were, what was happening in life, what was happening in your life, or his. He would stop and have a moment with you, and it was genuine and heartfelt. And for that one moment, you felt really important. And he was just such a great spirit, and definitely miss him. I just wish I had more time with him.
Oh, wow. My voice is really loud anyway, so that's what I'm told. Oh, thank you. Okay. Oh, well, I'm heartbroken that we're here under these circumstances. It is inspiring to see your family all come together, and I spent some time with Robert. I was approached by his mom, Sharon. She knew I had this property up in the middle of nowhere. Didn't really know if it was safe or not to go there, but said, Robert might be a good person to spend some time with, and so we ended up hooking up, and Robert ended up coming up for a weekend at the ranch, and then he loved it up there. And one thing I will say that it seems common is enthusiastic. He lived life with an amazing level of enthusiasm, which is a blessing. And I remember one trip, because he was living up at the ranch, and I came driving in my 6-mile-long Jeep trail, and I saw all these rivulets filled with gravel from the river. And I'm like, who did that? And so he took the quad in 5-gallon buckets and would just go down, and because I told him, I said, oh yeah, we got to work on this, and the next week I came up and it was done, and I thanked him, of course, and so on. His hammock was kind of funny because he would tie it he found these trees that of course went right across the road to the river, so he would get up early and take it down, and and actually one of the ropes is still on the tree, oddly, Robert was I really enjoyed him. He was kind of hard. I now listening to his family speak about him, I remember the burrito stories. I remember his time in New York, because we had drive time, 4-hour trip, and it was he could talk ad nauseum about many things, and he was so smart, and I tried to tell him that, explain to him. I said, Robert, you don't always have to be the smartest person in the room. Sometimes it's really helpful, because he's kind of overqualified, and he's just giving you advice, just like go in and just chill, and that was I think something that was hard for him, but I am grateful that I spent time with him. I wish I would have gotten to know him even better, and anyway, so sorry, but I'll miss him, and I'm sorry for your loss.
Oh, sorry. I'm Kevin, and I am Robert's cousin. And when I was about 11 or 12 years old, I had the privilege of going on a hike with my cousin Dustin and my cousin Robert. And Robert was the one that insinuated it, asking us to come out, which was, super cool, because who wants to hike with a couple of little kids anyway? We get out there, and it's supposed to be, just a few days hike, Robert ends up swimming that day in the river, totally washes out the map. Now we don't have a map to base our trip off of. And then that same night, I'm freaking out saying, we don't have a map, what are we going to do? He goes, just shut up. He makes me pine needle tea. And he pours me a little bit of brandy in the pine needle tea. And he just goes, that'll calm you down, go to bed. And then, the next day we proceeded to hike. We went and saw some beautiful lakes. I just remember, it was a really hard trek. At the last day, we decided to hike up this mountain, like Dustin was saying, he just would point to the top of the mountain and be like, oh, we're going to go up there. We also needed to see where the hell we were. And so it was intense because there was a lot of snow and it built ice. There was a huge crevasse right between the rock and the ice. And what he did was he tied me, Dustin, and him all together on a line. And he would just dig like huge little crevices in the ice so that we could put our feet in it. And he was always worried about us, like always taking care of us, and we were genuinely scared for our lives climbing down that crevice. Like it was scary. But I just remember that day always, just taught me like, just even when you're scared and you're just, out of your wits, like just you keep pushing through, you make it to the top, and you'll get there somehow.
100 Mackenzie's here. I am the second oldest cousin because of freaking April. She beat me to it. I also feel like Robert would enjoy this. I was trying to video this, and I went to check my watch and didn't realize I had an open bottle of water in my hand, and right into the crotch, just water everywhere. I can't see that. That one's for Robert. Robert and I weren't close. We were babies together. I remember my mom telling me he cried literally all of the time. All of the time he cried. No? Okay. We weren't close. And when I got that awful text from my dad saying that he was gone, it hit me so hard because I realized I never worried about Robert. I admired him. I looked up to him. And I didn't realize how much I related to him as the other outcast in the family. For me, it was being a very gay, liberal feminist in this family, and for him, it seemed to be just people. I admired him so much. I could never go out into the wilderness and just fend for myself, and I looked up to him so much, and I wish I could have told him. So I am thankful for Robert because I intend to tell every single one of you how much you mean to me. Sorry about the gay, liberal, feminist stuff, but besides that, I love all of you so much with all of my heart, and I love that I'm here with all of you. I hate the reason we're here, but I want to thank Robert for making me feel like I can come back to my family, and I always have a place to be, and he would too. So, and I know how much he loved us, and I missed him, and I wish I could tell that to him. So, thank you for having me, and I love you all so much.
So, I'm Aunt Karen, Robert, and got to see him 3 years of growing up, and he was highly intelligent, very smart kid. He had a brain that would just go and go and go. Part of it, I think he got it from his mom. Non-stop. The word that I describe Robert as if I do this. You know, Robert's a perfectionist. He was a perfectionist all the way. Everything he did was a definition of a perfectionist. Perfectionist believes that not only a perfection is achievable, but that it should be achieved whenever possible. Then always strive to make their work better, and often derive pleasure from investing time and effort into their projects. They enjoy paying attention to details and are often hard to please. So why did we hire Robert to fix our bathroom and work with Scott? Well, because I think the two of them knew how to communicate to one another to make our bathroom the best that it came out to. And all the other projects that Robert came to our house and he helped out with. And one of the neatest gifts, the funniest gifts, I sat there and thought about it, but I think he gave all his aunts and his uncles a first aid kit for Christmas.
Grandma and Grandma.
First aid kit to all of us. And you think, okay, believe me, that has become one of the most handy things to have in our household. But that was him. That was his thought process of how thoughtful he was and what he liked to do. He did think a lot of other people, more than himself a lot of times. Very giving individual. And he helped us big time with our house. Now with my son, or actually both of my boys, when he took him on that first trip, Kevin forgot to tell you his age of getting that brandy to calm him down. But he's like, Aunt Karen, I'm going to take Dustin and we're going to go to Yosemite and go hiking and camping. And I'm like, okay, my son's 14, I think about 14, 12, or I said, okay, all right. you can go on this trip. Because Dustin loved the outdoors, and Robert being older, I figured, okay, you could go on this trip with them and enjoy yourself. So they come back, and of course, I hear the one story that Kevin kind of mentioned about being on top of an ice cliff and on ropes together and so on. I'm like, okay. The next trip was to Yosemite again. I believe they went again, just Dustin and Robert, and but I'm always sitting there wondering, they're coming home, right? They're coming home on these trips that they would go on. And then they got a little bit more adventurous. The trip went to camp out in the snow. Now, when you camp out in the snow, that's fine. But I think the temperature of that weekend that they were going camping in the snow while Dustin was in high school was probably about 0 degrees outside.
Oh my gosh.
So we did come home a little bit frostbit.
Oh my gosh.
Then Robert took Dustin and they went to the caves. What are the name of the caves? Lava. And I'm like, you have a map, right? You will know how to get in and out of those caves. Oh yeah, Mom, we'll be fine, Mom. So they would adventure and they would bring back these lovely pictures of them playing cribbage or something in the caves and just having a good old time. And then Robert invited Dakota. I'm like, oh great, now both boys are going to go caving again, okay. So they went caving, but those are the things that they love to do. And if they had other trips, I wish there was another one. Because even though I'm sitting there stressed out about them and everything else, it's the enjoyment and the talks that they would come back and talk about. And I loved it. So I tell him thank you for giving him those adventures, as scary as they were. For me. Sometimes Dustin. I know, but for me. Scott wouldn't say anything. So I found this saying, I kind of tweaked it, but I'm going to read it. I have lost someone that I love deeply. One that we all wish was never taken from us this way. I keep asking myself why. Why did you leave us so young? It hurts so much to think that you are no longer here. I keep seeing your face through each falling tear. I keep pleading that this tragic ordeal is anything but real. My heart keeps breaking and tearing from within. This heart-rendering bad dream, though as I awaken and realize it is not. I can remember the good times I had with you. I will cherish all the memories. Now knowing that your memory will never disappear. I will never forget your laughs. And let me tell you, he had a lot of them. Because all of us have a piece of them with us. And that is how the love I had for you will ever last. Will forever last, sorry. I hope that you knew how many people truly cared about you. In that, in your passing, you have taught me that I should always stand tall and try to make the best of it all. Hopefully, through the tragedy, I will wake up and see that life can be short and taken from us so easily. You will truly be missed by so many. I am grateful for knowing you and lucky to have been part of your life. Love you, Robert. feeling down or anything, he would come into the room, he would just pounce on top of me and like be like, "Why are you crying? You have a great life. Smile, be happy." And like when I heard about him leaving, I was just like, "Come jump on top of me and tell me to smile, tell me everything will be alright."
And he like
He choked me a lot for fun. Come up behind me, go. But he was always very caring towards people when he noticed that they were sad or feeling down. He was here. I want to tell him. I want to ask him to tell me more about his trips and all the fun things that he's done, because it's always so interesting to hear from him. Is how to stay away from the bear. The bear came up to me, acts like a big thing in front of him. And I miss him.
I think we finally got the microphone tight. Right. My name's Dakota. I'm Dustin's brother, and I am the other person that went on the caving trip with Robert a few years back. Robert meant a lot to me in ways that I've only really ever expressed to him. He has gone to bat for me more times than I could ever say, and in more stories than I will ever share because they're also inappropriate. But the one thing that I'm really grateful that I got to tell him was that I was always very thankful that he got to be, that he got to fill in the spots of being an older brother to Dustin that I felt like I failed. Robert would take him on so many trips. He would show him love in so many ways. And he didn't just do it with Dustin. He did it with all of us. There were many times where he would just find a little hole and he would do what he could to fill it. He would do what he could to fix it, and that was the perfectionist in him. There were times where maybe all he knew how to do was to make fun of something or of someone. And he did a lot. He made fun of all of us. But, you know, that was just him. That's what he did. That's how it was a way that he told you that he loved you. Because saying those words out loud were harder for him. It was hard to show genuine emotion in the direct words. So he did it instead in the small words, in the acts of pouncing on you in the bed, in the acts of remodeling your home or your bathroom. And he showed it in ways of coming home from that trip and hearing that a huge windstorm had come through and blown down the fence in between Sharon and Bob's house and the neighbors, and he just looked at us on the way back and said, "We're fixing that tomorrow." And we did. We went to Home Depot, we bought a whole new fence, and I think we had that thing up in 4 hours. Robert was so many small parts of our lives. It was hard for him to be a big part, but he knew how to be those small parts, and he knew how to fill those holes and fix that. I will forever be grateful for the fact that I got to tell him thank you for filling in the small parts of being an older brother that I just couldn't do. And I will always love just how happy he made me, regardless of the fights or anything else.
I will always sit there and remember him as someone positive and loving and caring in his own ways. So thank you, Robert.
In closing, I found this poem that I think is very fitting that I would like to share. We gather to remember the little things that made a special place in our heart, to remember those happy times when we laughed and those times when our hearts broke as one. For who could put a price on memories? We gather to share the pain, to hurt when you hurt without presuming that our pain is the same, to cry when you cry and not try to hide or avoid our tears, for tears are memories in motion. We gather to give the gift of grief, to stand beside you in silence and not be uncomfortable with your tears, to allow you the gift of mourning this loss and not lose patience, for grief is nature's way of healing a broken heart. Sharon, Carolyn, Bob, and Alex, you were faithful and vigilant guardians of Robert's life. And though the road was long and sometimes trying, you never gave up. The hole in the world where Robert used to be will feel especially large and daunting. The journey of grief is long, and no one should have to walk it alone. We are all here today to tell you that we are here with you and for you. I know for the rest of us, it is hard to know what to say to these four wonderful humans. All you need to say is, I'm sorry, and I am here for you. Be a quiet shoulder to cry on, or an open ear to listen. Washington Irving said, there is a sacredness in tears. They are not the mark of weakness, but of power. They speak more eloquently than 10,000 tongues. They are messengers of overwhelming grief and unspeakable love. Accept your tears and expressions of loss. Accept the angels in human form who come along with a word, a hug, or a memory to share. Please keep these four in mind during difficult times. The holidays, the anniversaries, the birthdays, the times when we know you will miss him most. The family will be taking Robert and spreading his ashes over one of his favorite places so he can be at rest, doing the thing that he loved most, exploring the outdoors. If you did not get a chance to share today, or if you have something else you would like to share, please, we have note cards up here. Please leave a memory, a note for the family, anything you would like to have, and leave it in the hammock. As you know, that was one of Robert's favorite places. As our service comes to a close, I invite you all to join us for lunch and swimming if you desire. I know having a funeral during a pandemic is a little strange, but we have been grieving as a family here for over a week. So we are all about the hugs and the love. However, we will be respectful of whatever your comfort level is too. Please feel free to socially distance yourself as you feel comfortable, and know that we understand and are just grateful that you are here. Robert, you are loved, and you will be missed.